Hello, hi. This video is just about my explanation of my assignment 4 for the course Web Data Visualization. So this is my interactive design, and here I just use two interactive techniques. One of which is selection technique. So when I just select these buttons, it just shows its respective graph associated with that button. So when I click that button, it also the change is just uh, the change app happens with the transition effect. So this just helps the user to understand what change has the graph undergone to. And then the first button is just about host stars near to sun's temperature, and the second button is about planets closer to its habitable temperature, and the third button is about host stars closest to sun's radii. So here the sun's radii, I just took it as 1 because in the data set the sun's radii is referred to 1. So based on the sun's radii, all the host stars radii is displayed in the data set. So I also gave the labels here. I just tried to minimize the usage of labels, but I couldn't avoid those because without these labels, the user may not have any idea on what he's actually reading. So the second interactive technique that I used is zoom technique. So when I just put my cursor on these circle elements, it just displays a pointer cursor so that the user may know that he can just click on the circles to zoom. So when he clicks on the circles, he can just zoom the circles and look at and have a detailed look at the circle elements. And these are the two interactive techniques that I used. So let's just go to the code now. So this is my code, and here I just created a variable and height variables. Width and height variables, and I just give a margin variable. Here I'm using version 5 D3, so I just used the CSV method and imported my data set. So after importing it, I just gave then dot then in this dot then function. Basically what it does here is when the dataset just imports successfully, when it gets loaded successfully, all this piece of code executes. And if the dataset doesn't load successfully, so the program execution order goes to this cached function and just displays the error to the console. So let's quickly move on to the code. So here I just created buttons. So this is the code which displays the buttons on the screen. So here I just appended a group, and I just uh, appended a group to the body, and I just joined some data, these data values, using data and enter after selecting that group. And I also gave class names to each button using this anonymous function, and then I gave text which is to be displayed on that button using this code. And then I just converted the string values that we have in the data set to the numbers, because whenever the data in D3, whenever we import the data will be in string format, but we need to convert those into numbers because to display them on the graph. So then I just sorry so I just scaled the dataset values here using scale linear, because the dataset values I'm using here is quantitative values. So then I just give the domain of the scale here. So I just use extend function, which gives the minimum and maximum values of this column name, and then I give the range, and then I just use the same extend function here to give minimum and maximum values of this column name. Then I just stored those scale values in these variables, and I then just appended svg element to the body and gave width and height, and I gave a zoom interactive technique here using this piece of code. And then I just gave a graph label. So this graph here, what we actually do is display some text, so that what this the current graph is going to say about. So then I just created axis here using axis bottom, axis left, and then we just go to this part of the code where we just call those axes. And so this is the x, we are calling here the x-axis, and I then just gave a label to that x-axis by appending a group, and I just gave a class name to that group, and I just shifted the coordinate of that group and just positioned that label on the graph and gave a text to that label. And then I did the same here. I just called the y-axis and I just gave a y label. Here I'm not using transform translate, I'm just giving the x and y coordinates to just position the y label, and I just transformed it and rotated it to -90 so that the label might look inverted. I mean, but the label positioning will be vertical on the just beside the y-axis. And then I just appended this SVG circle elements here. So I just did join the data using these by selecting circle, and I just uh, gave the cx and cy are the coordinates of that circle. So I just gave the x scale of this column, so which just scales the circle on the screen. So then here I used the stroke color blue and the width as 3, and I gave the fill color white because keeping in mind the data identity design guideline. So then I just gave an effect to the circle elements. So whenever using this code, uh, the effect is just that when the user hovers over the SVG circle elements, then the pointer cursor is displayed. So my code is just simple code. So what I actually did is I used all this part of the code in two other parts of the code. So what I did is I just created three event handlers for the three buttons that I created. So for each click on the button, the above same code is executed. I mean, the above same code is used uh, on the initiation of that event. So when the planet's temperature button is clicked, so this button is called using the class name which is given to that button. So I just selected that class name to select that button, and then I just removed the old SVG that I appended to the body, and I just created a new SVG here using the same above code, and I just changed the column names here so that it just scales uh, using those column names. And then I just appended a new SVG and just gave the graph label and created axis and called the axis again and just gave the adding label and just gave a label for x-axis and same for the y-axis. And then I just appended the new SVG circle elements. So all this code is just as same as the first code that which I explained on the top of the code. So this code is repeated again when this button hot temperature button is clicked. So only the change here is the column names. So I just change the column names. So before before creating the new scatter plot, we just need to remove the old SVG element. So then I just did the same again. So a new scatter plot is created using these two column names. And then the last one is a bit different because in that event we just create a bar graph. So I just remove the old SVG element and I just use this here. This column name has I just consider it as ordinal value, so I just use the scale band which is similar to ordinal scaling. So what this just does is the, this also this scales the ordinal value, and also it just gives the width by using this dot bandwidth method. We can just give the width of the bars. So I just use this scale band to scale again, and so I just data mapped those data set values. So what this dot map creates is it just creates a new array by just mapping the values of the data set. So that array is given to this domain. So I just gave domain and I just gave the range and I just gave padding in between the bars. And for the y scale I use scale linear because it's quantitative values, and I just change the column names here with respect to that graph. And then I just appended a new SVG element and I just gave a graph label as before, and same created axis here and just call the axis, gave y label and call the x-axis and gave the x-axis label. And then I also gave the transition here. So then I just remove the old circle elements. So this piece of code is not necessary. So I think I need to remove this. Yep. So let's check it out. Yep. So then I just appended the rectangle elements to the screen. Excuse me. Sorry. And I just gave the stroke blue. And I just gave the x and y coordinates using the x scale variable. So then I use a dot bandwidth method to just give the width of the bars, and then I just gave the height here. So that's it. So this is a brief description of my code. Thank you very much.